Newspaper headlines today, April 1st, 2024. Headlines in the Vanguard newspapers. Bolder headline says, recapitalization. Banks sweat over exclusion of 3.8 trillion naira retained profit. Details of that on page 20. Above the nameplate, our leaders behave like men in drunken stupor. That's according to Kuka. Details of that on page 4. NSCIA to governors. Stop asking Tinubu to curb insecurity in your states. Details of that on page 10. Today's housing news in the pages of the Vanguard newspapers today. Economy. Nigerians no longer accommodate relatives as cost of living soars. Anambra set to mitigate flooding in coastal communities. Details of these and more on the pages of the Vanguard newspapers today. Headlines today in the Guardian newspapers. Bolder headline says, oil theft persists in Niger Delta despite militarization, private security. Details of that on page 6. Residents warn pro-Wike lawmakers over impeachment threat. Details of that on page 5. Sani, Wike, others get ultimatum to publish agreements accounts for 5.9 trillion naira, $4.6 billion loans. Details of that on page 6. Housing news today in the pages of the Guardian newspapers. Experts seek adoption of innovative platform to halt property fraud. And on the foreign scene, Greece lifts price of popular golden visa to fight housing crisis. Details of these and more on the pages of the Guardian newspapers today. Headlines today in the Daily Trust newspapers. Bolder headline says, Kebbi residents loot government private warehouses. Details of that on page 4. And still below the nameplate, debt. Kaduna APC suspends women leader for criticizing Governor Sani. Details of that on page 15. Nigeria records 55.2 billion naira trade imbalance with the United Kingdom. Details of that on page 21. Ceasefire talks resume as Israel kills 400 Palestinians in 2 weeks. Housing news today on the pages of the Daily Trust newspapers. Housing Ministry inaugurates Savicom unit to boost housing delivery. Details of that and more on the pages of the Daily Trust newspapers today. Headlines today in the Punch newspapers. Bolder headline says, Easter. Governors, senators beg Nigerians say hardship over soon. Above the nameplate, banks eye Eurobonds, foreign investors for 4 trillion fresh capital. Details of that on page 21. Still above the nameplate, Naira closes at 1,309 Naira to the dollar as banks sell $2.5 billion. Details of that on page 22. Housing news today on the pages of the Punch newspapers. Housing Minister charges Quantity Surveyors Board on transparency. Details of that and more on the pages of the Punch newspapers today.
Visit Housing TV Africa on YouTube and click on the subscribe button. Subscribe to Housing TV Africa to stay updated on latest happenings in Nigeria's housing sector. Follow our social media pages, like and share our posts on Facebook, Housing TV Africa, on Twitter, Housing TV Africa, Instagram, Housing TV Africa. Join the conversation and keep up with latest housing updates.